It's always my pleasure to do these. Just like y'all, I share a love of history and heritage. We're seeing things change so much around the Outer Banks. You know, between George and Ada and Jimmie here, the changes that they've seen, it hasn't just been an overnight thing. It's been change on top of change on top of change on top of change. And we're still seeing some today. But Jimmie Austin is a good friend of mine. I knew his father. His grandmother was also quite a character. He's a Hatteras native, but he's been living here on the beach since the late 50s, early 60s. Of course, Miss Ada here, Corbell Scarborough, she is a duck native. In case you didn't think there was such a thing, there really is such a thing as a duck native, and we've got one. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. She's the best thing that ever came out of duck. That's what I'm told.
I'm going to go out and come in again.
And we've got George McLean over here. George is I like to say he's a well-known Outer Banks personality. It's amazing every time I talk to him because he knows everybody in a four-county area. And everybody knows him as well. But George is a Currituck native. But you know, what we enjoy is the people that from duck, you might as well incorporate Ocracoke and take all of Dare County. It's amazing how all these personalities and all these people show up right here, and we can be able to unify as one people. We're not duck over here and Manio over there and Hatters down there. We are Outer Bankers. We've all got the same. Okay, well, I'm going to start with you, Jimmie.
You would, Danny.
Jimmie said if you embarrass me, I'm going to hunt you down.
Yeah, use a beeper.
Jimmie, I know your ancestors go back, you know, way before the American Revolution, but there's one thing that ties the Austins together, and that's the life on the water. And I know you've been involved in fishing, almost every aspect of fishing your whole life.
Yeah.
And I see there at Austin Seafood pretty much an icon over here across from Jockey Ridge that started in 1960, or where the building anyway, the seafood business came a little longer, but that's, you know, that's 50 years now. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your experiences in fishing? I know you've done it all.
Well, I come from a fishing family, Hatteras Island, all local fishermen. Was raised down there with me, all types of fishing. Worked in fish houses. Come to Nag's Head in the early 50s, fished on the beach commercially, along with other work with earn a living. And then it turned into the seafood business and the wholesale and retail business. And it's where it is today.
You get a lot of people that come in there to your seafood store that you see year after year. And
people from the north clear to Miami every year, same people over and over, along with new people.
Right. Who are some of the people you remember back in your fishing? Were there any people that you really looked up to and that you thought that when you were a teenager, you know, if I can do it like this guy does?
Well, the people on Hatteras Island, Lee Peel, Heath O'Neill that you had on your program earlier, long-time commercial fisherman and one of the best. Lee Peel, another. Jasper Williams of Avon, all those local men I knew.
Right. Well, things have really changed. We kind of look at what we've done with the American farmer and pretty much ushered him out the door, and it looks like fishing is heading that way as well. Jimmie's had to adapt it, not being able to do it on the beach. He's had to go into the seafood business with his own store. But, you know, that's one thing I admire about the Ocracokers down there. The next time you're in Ocracoke, you'll see the Ocracoke Seafood Company, and they have, all the fishermen there have taken part of their proceeds to put together as one to run that seafood company down there, which will ensure that fishing is part of the heritage down there in Ocracoke. And maybe we might be able to see something like done like that in our seafood communities, whether it's Wine Cheese or back in Collington. All the restaurants down there in Ocracoke have agreed to buy exclusively from Ocracoke Seafood, and it's been a smashing success so far. Well, I'm going to hop over here to my buddy George McLean. George, growing up over there on the southern part of Currituck Peninsula there, I guess, you know, you spent a lot of time over on the beach. You told me one time that you actually used to come over here and sell produce.
Right. We sold vegetables from my cousin's farm, Sammy and Brian Smith, and their dad, Elder Brian. But we would start at the Journey's End, which was just on the hook you're going to Duck. We'd go to the old Sea Ranch. If you knew, the Sea Ranch is where the Hilton is now. And man, it was a classy place because we were used to outdoor toilets and things like that. We didn't realize that people really walk around in shirts and ties and things and bow ties. And so as we worked our way down the beach, we'd stop over at down at Winks, and then we'd stop at Dean's Place. And probably when I say Dean's Place, I said, who's Dean's Place? That is the Jolly Roger restaurant now, by the way. It's changed. Then we'd stop at the Orville, Wilbur Wright, the Cherokee, the Edgewater, and then Edmund Melson's, the Kitty Hawk. Finally, we worked down to that famous Carolinian Hotel, and when we got there, we were just hoping we could, sell something. But before we got there, what we do is we try to sell enough that at Twyford's Trading Post, where the trading post is at, it's called Twyford's, and we would try to sell enough that we could get a chocolate milkshake. Sammy, Brian Jr., myself. If we didn't, we'd turn and go into Collington. And
start a fight?
Collington was absolutely so different because these people, if they hadn't gone to school in Kitty Hawk, they hadn't been anywhere else. So we came in there one day. We came into Collington one day, and this boy yelled out, said, "Brian Jr., have you dug any watermelons yet?" Brian Jr. said, "Good gosh, I do. They don't even know watermelons grow on top of the ground." But that was really our experience. But we call them the bankers. Sammy and Brian's daddy, Uncle Brian, they call them the bankers when he come down here. But we go all the way down to, when I saw Mrs. Heyman the first time that owned the Seafair in the Arlington, she was such a gracious lady at the Arlington Hotel and at the First Colony Inn. There was Neil and 8 Days.
Right.
But then if we didn't sell, we kept right on going. We went to Manio and come back. Now, I want to tell this story because I think it has a lot of good fun in it. I didn't come that day, but Sammy and Brian Jr., and there was one more that went. They sold all their vegetables. And that plane was flying that took people on air tours. So they decided, maybe we'll go over there and see how much it is. It was $10 or $15 to go up in the plane apiece. So they took the plane ride. They got back home. Uncle Brian didn't have any money. He didn't know where this money went any time. He'd always take a plane. They took a plane ride up there, and I said, I miss that. But it really changed. I showed you one of my pictures here. I showed him a picture I had taken down on the beach when we were, I think we were in the 5th grade. Sammy and I were, and Brian Jr. was a little bit older, and I don't want to say he was in college, but my mom took pictures of us standing on this whale right over on the beach over here, and it's 65 foot long. And Danny got a picture there that I brought him. And these were, you hear there was a whale ashore. Everybody from Curry got to come over here and look at it. Any kind of odd thing. One time a big ship came ashore right here by the Kitty Hawk Pier. It was called the Daniel Drake. But it came in where we could wave to the people up there on the ship, and it was waiting here by a sandbar. So it was an interesting place to live, although we didn't think we had as much as anybody else until we got on. We realized what we had.
That had to be one huge.
Yeah, 65 feet long. I have another picture. Brian's wife Lois had sent me those, and it's a pretty neat picture of standing on. He's got his rib belly.
I bet after 2 or 3 days in the sun, that got smelly. Yeah, kind of hard to get that smell out of you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And Jimmie's daddy used to say that fish smell was the smell of money. Well, Ed, I want to jump over here to you. you know, we've got Anna's sisters here. Is Joan Corbell over here, who's has helped a lot. We're going to get you up here one time. Anna, I know growing up there in Duck and stuff, can you tell us a little bit about what it was like, say, being over there in Kathy's Inn? When we look at Duck today, when you ride into Duck, it's just undergone such a huge transformation, but I know you must have known everybody, or were related to everybody.
We did, but the neighbors at Catfish Inlet, like my dad was in the Coast Guard, and I was born in 1932. And the only doctor was across the Sound in Poplar Branch. So there was a midwife that lived in Duck, North Carolina, and she came to the home and lived there for a week or two before I was born, just in case. And definitely when I was born, there was a big nor'easter and you could not get across the Sound to get the doctor. So I was delivered by a midwife. We lived in a little 4-room house with a front porch and a back porch, outside toilet, no refrigeration, nothing but kerosene lamps. The only water in the house was from a barrel that sat outside the kitchen that was piped into the kitchen. We had wood-burning stoves. My mother cooked with a kerosene stove. And I was a poor girl and didn't even know I was a poor girl because I had a very good, happy life. And we were right there between the Sound and the sea. And my dad did a lot of duck hunting. We fished in the Sound. We caught crabs. My brother had a long wire with a little piece of what goes on a fishing net, the weight, and he would get mullets with that. That was a pastime type thing. I could pull the back off a crab and bite off a leg and bait my hook and think nothing about it. It was just a very happy life. And then we had the Coast Guard station. There was only 9 families. We were all like very close, very almost like family. And the Coast Guardmen had to stand watch up in the tower. And of course they could always see if we kids were in the Sound or on the beach, or they could sort of keep track of what the kids were doing.
Couldn't get away with anything.
And then they had the only grass. And of course at the years that I was raised, the cattle were roaming all over the beach. And so we were fenced in. Our home had a big fence all around. And as a family thing to do, we would go hit the beach with a horse and cart and pick up lumber. And we had fencing for the animals. All the animals, of course, we had gardens. We had no stores. We had no nothing, really. Daddy raised a garden down next to the Sound. I was raised on organic vegetables. I know that for sure now, because we used fish for fertilizer or whatever we could get. And we kept a rain barrel buried in the ground. And that was our water when we put out little plants. And it was a family thing to do, to go there and pull the bugs off of the collards or the greens or whatever we had growing, and you just squeeze them. You know, I've never been afraid of a spider or a bug. We were taught what a black widow was, and to stay away from those. But that was one family thing we did. The other was pick up lumber off the beach, and then we built all this fencing. All the animals had houses, and we had fencing around. And every board was a different length because they come off the beach and Daddy never bothered to make it look. I've got pictures. No wonder we were, you know. But life was very simple. But I remember my childhood days as being just very, very happy. We did not have, Dad made us a sled one time with, he had gotten gun shells. He did a lot of duck hunting, and he had gotten a wooden box full of with the gun shells in it. He had ordered them from someplace, and then he took the runners out of a wooden barrel and made the runners for the sled. And he made us a sled with the box and the runners, and put a rope on it. And that was one of our toys. I remember as a little girl getting a doll baby one Christmas and a carriage. And that was, I never remember anything but Bob Jackson pickup sticks and maybe a Monopoly game. We just didn't have a whole lot. But life was happy. We ate good.
You were poor and didn't know it. You were poor and didn't know it.
That's why we were very poor and didn't know it. But then in 1938, my dad had bought a lot at Kildare Hills and on the oceanfront, and 2 doors down this side of the Orville Wilbur Wright Hotel, and he built a cottage. And it had 3 bedrooms downstairs and 6 bedrooms upstairs. And Jessie Baum, not Jessie Baum, Elijah Baum built the cottage, and Bill Harris's grandfather. And I think he probably got 50 cents an hour. And I think the cottage cost something like $3,000. And Dad had picked the lot up for like $500. And we had electricity, we had running water, we had a commode, we had indoor plumbing, and we had a toaster, and I got to eat a piece of toast for the first time instead of biscuits, and got to dunk it in the hot coffee, and I thought it was one of the best things I've ever had in my whole life.
Who needs caviar when you got those?
Right. But even at Kildare Hills in those days, with a Stop and Shop, my Uncle Elwood was over here on one side, and Twyford's was just up the street. The earlier places he was talking about, the Caltonians, I got to meet Johnny Moore. That was a little kid that you probably see down at the Wright Memorial that watched the first airplane flight. I got to go by his home in Compton. He was a fisherman. He always wore boots, and they were always cut off. And in the early 50s, he was invited to go to Washington, D.C. And they said, well, do you think we'll be able to get those boots off of John to take him to D.C.? But,
Well, Ada, let me ask you a little bit about, we all know where the name Duck comes from, obviously.
Yes.
But I know some of your family was actually, very instrumental in the running of the old Currituck Shooting Club up there.
yes, my father worked there for 2 years. My dad did not marry until he was 28 years old. And he was raised in the orphanage out in North Carolina, and he come back. His mother put her first 2 children in an orphanage, then she married a man, had 3 children, and then they had 3 children, so there was his, hers, and theirs. But that's the way it was in those days. And even, I think several of her girls even worked out with other families just because times were tight. And I know my dad had told me that he had walked from Poor Ridge all the way over here to just set a net. And he said it was rare when you got to ride in a vehicle. I mean, times were really, we were just a bunch of poor folks down here. And
tell me a little bit about some of the people that used to come to the shooting club. I guess you had all walks of life.
At the Currituck Shooting Club, my dad worked there for several years before. I think that before he went in the Coast Guard. He was 28, I think, when he and my mom got married. And he had worked there with Mr. John Pointer that had the Currituck Shooting Club. And of course, these were very wealthy people that come down to the Currituck Shooting Club. And they come down to duck hunt. And my dad was hired as a guide for the marshland, but then during duck hunting season, they would help take the people duck hunting and clean ducks, and that was a big club, and they had a special dining room where people that worked there would eat, and then of course they had the real nice dining room where the wealthy people ate and all. And my dad, when he was 90 years old, had never been inside of that club other than the kitchen area. Because back in those days, you were just an employee and that's all you were.
Yeah, these were high rent people.
And so when he was 90 years old, a distant cousin of mine was the manager of that club. And I got to take my dad for the first time through that whole club, and he got to see it, and he had been there for a couple of years. But then, when we lived at Capas Inlet, he had met some men and some friends that he used to take duck hunting, and they'd come down from Virginia, and they'd have nice little sandwiches and things instead of biscuits. If they had any leftovers, Dad would bring them home. They were always good.
Well, they did everything for these people, didn't they, Miss Ada? I mean,
But then,
they did everything for them.
They did.
All they had to do was point and shoot.
that's right, they did. And my dad, sometimes you'd get out in the Currituck Sound duck hunting and kill all these ducks, and then the tide might go out to the northeaster end, and you couldn't. And I've seen my dad walk in as a child. I can remember it to this day. And he had just all the ducks he could take on a string around his neck. I mean, they used to, and then the north end of our house was always filled with ducks. I mean, I probably looked like a duck. We were raised as ducks.
When you go to the restaurant, you don't have
Ducks
duck.
and fish and chickens and collard greens.
I wanted to ask you, when you think of Kitty Hawk, you think of the Smiths, you think of the Baums, you think of the Perrys, you think of the Beechams and all these names, but Corbell, which was your maiden name, you and Joan, that's also a family that has been, I mean, it might not have been as big as the Midgets and as large and all of it, but there's been Corbells, a handful of them coming right down through the ages. And I remember reading about a fella, Malachi Corbell, who I'm pretty sure he would have had to have been in your family. But this was, just let me set the stage up and stuff, and I know this was before your time. But this fella, Malachi Corbell, this was during Reconstruction. It was very tumultuous political times, probably not unlike a lot of the things we're going through today. But Malachi Corbell rescued, they'd had an entire restructuring of the life-saving service. We had a huge wreck up in Currituck, the metropolis, loss of over 100 people. We had to mess with the Huron down here. We had the home down in Ocracoke, even though that was a little earlier, but there was colossal loss of life here. And a lot of the newspapers and media outlets at that time were just all over the North Carolina District of Life Saving, thinking that these were a bunch of incompetents, when actually the finest watermen that ever existed were here in our area. And it was a matter of getting these guys organized and getting the right people in the higher-ups in the United States Life Saving Service. This was the most efficient bureaucracy that ever existed. And by the time they got the Carolina coast in order, it was our guys were the best of the best. But anyway, long story short, Malachi Corbell was the first medal recipient. He was for rescuing 2 men there at Cappy's Inlet, and I guess, was he a direct descendant? Was he?
Yes, he was a direct descendant. Yes, he was. My father came from that.
Would he have been there in Duck, or was he here in the village?
No, he was at the life-saving station, and I think he was only there about a year because later he moved on up the northern beaches to the Currituck Inlet.
Right, they moved these guys around.
He's buried at Knox Island.
Okay.
But that's who we Corbells. My daddy's grandfather was born probably about 1847, and that's about the time that Malachi was just a little bit before that, I think.
Right, I think he was, I've seen his, I think sometime in the 1820s. But they were looking for leaders. They had to have these guys who could, show some integrity to whip these people into shape. And it was a big journey, but they got it done. Jimmie, I'm going to hop over to you again. One of the things I like to do is talk to old timers. It might sound bizarre to you, but I really love it. I do. It's just, the fact that you know, some of the qualities of life that we enjoy today, we owe to these people. And I want to tell you a little bit about James Austin. This guy was a character, and it was Jimmie's father. And I can't really go into some of his saltiness tonight. He could tell a story. He would get you going, and then, you know, was that man telling me the truth or not? But anyway, James was here to Brithaven for a long time. I remember talking to him in his 90s, and he was sharp as a tack. But you might remember 1993, Hurricane Emily came up, and CBS News was down here, and the head guy himself came over to Brithaven looking for a James Austin, said he was the person he needed to talk to. And Jimmie, can you just give us a little bit of recollection about who it was and anything?
Well, I won't go any deeper than the word bull. I'm going to
Was there a second syllable to?
I won't use that. They called me from an exit here, Dan Rather, and asked if my father he could be interviewed on hurricanes on the Outer Banks of North Carolina because of his age and being associated with them all those years. I said, I'm sure he will. Will you go over with us? I said, no. No way. So I sent him over. He didn't only tell Dare County, North Carolina, the United States, he told the whole free world that his mommy, he called her, says, James, get off the back of that couch. Get down and open the screen door and let that school of mothers out of the house. That was in 36. So you see what I was saying.
Yeah. All right, let's kind of move away from James Austin here for a little bit.
Get away from there.
He could tell us that he was a lovable man. He really was. But you never know some of the stuff he would tell. I'd heard a story one time. He was at the Ferry Dog 3 years, wasn't he? With the
Yeah, he was with Ferry Dog.
But people would ask things like, you know, you'd have a flock of cormorants flying through, and you know, you have people on vacation. They're not from here, but you know, one time one of them had asked James, well, what did those cormorants eat? And without missing a beat, he said, ma'am, they dearly love collards. And I would never have imagined. Okay, I've got a picture here of this building, Chris. This is, the headline says, Old Station After Ash Wednesday Storm, 1962. Believe me, they've got some excellent food here and great service and great staff. But based on this picture here, you wouldn't have been dining here that night after the Ash Wednesday storm. I want to talk to our three guests here about this. George, do you have any remembrances of the Ash Wednesday storm?
Actually, I was at school at North Carolina, but that was my first year working at the Seafair restaurant. And when I got there, it was 2 months after the storm. And they cleaned up everything, but they had a sliding pocket door, and they'd pull it out, and it was like over waist deep in the Seafair, actually, where the water was. And I was in school, so I didn't get an opportunity really to see the storm, but I saw I heard everything about Ash Wednesday and how bad it was. But the biggest thing that we heard, one of the most memorable things was Jethro Midget down at Midget Seafood told them that when they built the bypass out here, that they were causing a problem because it was a little bit higher, and when the water came in, it couldn't get back out. And so normally the sound in the ocean meant a lot when he was a kid. But I think one of the charter boats came up into the road next to Jockey Ridge, and 9 feet of water. That's how deep it was back there.
Soundside? Good question.
Soundside Road.
Adam, were you here on the beach?
No, I was in Florida.
All right. Okay. Jimmie, I know you were on the beach then. They had said, I was talking to Linda Meakin, she's in here somewhere, but she remembers your father saying the barometer's getting ready to bottom out. I don't know what's going on, but we've got a mess coming on. I haven't seen something like this since the 1933 storm. They didn't have advanced weather. Well, they had some of it, but they didn't have the Weather Channel. I'll put it that way. And they didn't have Jim Cantori, thank goodness. Jim Cantori holding on to his hat and just acting like he's getting blown away like he's a Kleenex in a hurricane. And then there's two boys walking behind him with their boogie boards getting ready to go out in the ocean. So it's kind of hard on your credibility. But Jimmie, what's your recollections of Ash Wednesday?
We had 42 inches of ocean water in the building that I own today.
Across the
store, across the dock, in the store, 42 inches ocean water. All the houses on the ocean side of the beach, hotels, houses. Oceanfront was out, 5 foot of sand, and some of them in the whole lower floor. A lot of the houses across the street after the storm, where they left their foundation and went to the Jockey Ridge side, had to be moved back and reposted. All of the old ones are in today, and Isaiah, the old house, with a new posting, brought off from that storm.
You can just kind of imagine what would happen today. I don't want to be a forebearer of bad news, but if we had something along those lines, what would happen here on this beach? And it could happen here at any time. I'll give you something to think about here with hurricane season coming up. Jimmie, anything else there on, I want to get back to George talking about the seafair there, but is there any other storms that, that you can, do you remember the 44 storm or anything?
44, I was a small boy on Hatcher's Island. I wasn't in Nag's Head then.
Okay, all right, okay.
My father's home had 3 foot of water in it then, in Hatcher's Village. Of course, my father's home was close to the ground to start with, but had 3 foot of water.
Yeah,
That running water this lady finally got, I never had.
Yeah. Well, what was some of your brothers and sisters? Can you give us just a little snapshot? I mean, Ada, talking about being just blissfully happy there, but what was it like growing up down there in Hatterswick?
Like this lady said with Doug, everybody was happy, everybody had a good time. We didn't have electricity in the early years of my life, then we did have it, but we never had running water at no time, or commodes in my house at no time in the years I lived on Hatcher's Island.
Right.
We had Susan Roebuck catalogs in the toilet.
My board come along a couple years later.
All right, we don't want to go down that James All right. Jimmie, you told a nice little story there about your grandmother, Sally Austin. Is that correct? Was that your grandmother?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That was my grandmother.
What were some? I know she had a dry sense of humor and just a delightful person. She treated every child in the village like she was her own.
She did.
But what do you remember about her? Was she have some cooking skills? Did she,
She was a great cook. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great cook.
Yeah.
Made everything herself. She didn't buy anything in a store to serve. She made it herself.
Right. And she, those women didn't shy away from cleaning ducks or cleaning fish.
She done everything like that to come to her that day, whatever it was.
And everything
If
about
they
the
brought
pig
ducks
was
home,
clean.
she cleaned ducks.
Yeah.
If they brought fish, she cleaned fish.
Okay. Well, George, I want to. We're going to talk about the casino here. Were you here with the casino when the casino
Yes,
did it all?
indeed.
Okay.
Grew up
All right. This is a family show here, but we're going to talk about the casino. George, before we get to that, you told me there at the Seafair, and it really did jog my memory. I'm old enough to have caught the tail end of the Seafair and the Caroline, but you hit on something. You said right there on the marquee of the sign, it said the place to eat, and it pretty much was the only place to eat.
It was, a matter of fact, I'm going to give you my business card from 1969.
Oh my God.
And if you think of it, that was a class place down here.
It's embossed in gold.
It was a neat place because it was not many restaurants that had that kind of atmosphere with candlelight. And when I started working there, Mr. and Miss Heyman, Miss Heyman had been in the Gould family that ran the Tranquil House in Mania. And she had been in the restaurant business, and Mr. Heyman was a engineer, I think, for the highway department. He met her when they built the causeway to Manio. And so they bought the Arlington, and they had run the Arlington for years and made a oyster bar out front across the street, and they call it the Seafair. And finally, in 1961, they expanded that to 3 dining rooms. And when I came there and worked in 1962, there were, it was one of the nicest places. You couldn't believe it, in eastern North Carolina, I would say.
Where was it exactly, George? Was it there where that?
13.5-mile post. It's just where the post office is.
Okay.
You could see it from the post office across the street.
Up on that hill?
And the Arlington was directly across the street. Well, Mr. and Ms. Heyman sold the Arlington to some people called Feldmeyer, and they were running it when I first got there. The Seafair later, you know, when you're in a restaurant business, sometimes the cooks have a tendency to use alcohol when they shouldn't. And we
thought they were just prima donnas.
we had this cook that was fantastic. He'd been at Arlington, and Mike, that owned the Seafair later, his mom, he went into service, and his mom and dad had this guy cooking. And finally, in the mid-60s, we couldn't get food out of the kitchen. So the guys, they were ready to walk out, some of the waiters. And I said, boys, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take the little room, and I'll go back there and cook. They said, you can't cook. I said, I ain't do as good a job as he's doing. I said, I've seen him cook. So 3 nights, I went back, and as the night went on and he started walking around to get meals, I just took my pants off today, put an apron on, and put a
You were the chef.
had a pair of shoes back there, tennis shoes, put them on, and away we went. And about 3 nights later, Mr. Heyman came back there and said, what are you doing? I said, I'm cooking, Mr. Heyman. He said, where is Sam? I said, I sent him home. He said, you can't do that. I said, I've been cooking 3 nights back there. I sent him home every night. And then that's when I kind of became their little right-hand man. I started doing all these things, and Mike came back to the Seafair. And his parents got the Arlington back. So Mike and I became real close, and I started helping him manage. And I was managing the day and wait tables at night, and I was double dipping. I was making, you know, the lifeguards were making
A lot of money at that
the lifeguards were making $35. We were making $150 a week. And they couldn't understand why we were out buying everybody drinks and stuff. They were all around. But the story I'd like to tell you, Mike came in one night and he was real refreshed. He had been working both morning and night. Well, I relieved him all this. And he came in one night and he had me run in the front, and he goes, what in the heck is happening to my restaurant? I said, what are you talking about? He said, I got 125 seats. He said, there's 145 people sitting down. I said, don't go in the kitchen. There's not a table or chair back there. He goes, what are we going to do? I said, build on it, Mike. I said, my guy's got a 2-hour wait. This is how our building codes had changed. 14 days later, we had people sitting in another 125 seats. Wow. Out of the bank room behind the Seafair. And then later it became the big dinner dance place, you know, from seat 500.
Yeah, I imagine when somebody said, my compliments to the chef, you probably yelled out from behind the kitchen, you're welcome! Well, George, we got Griselles here tonight. You know, I know you had, we had a good show last night with the Lost Colony and some of the remembrances over on Roanoke Island. But, you know, the Lost Colony back then really involved everybody. I mean, it really is one of our showpieces of tourism here. But you had some experiences there.
Well, we from cutting lawns in Currituck for about $2 for about 2 acres. We got a job when I was 14 years old, and I was going into high school. I went over to Manio and auditioned to be an Indian. And I didn't know it went all through this dance and stuff, but anyway, anyway, I was a pretty big boy, 14 years old, and they said, look, you're going to be the understudy for Manio. Well, Sonny Briggs' his brother, that's a boat builder, and their parents owned the Croatan Inn and Lodge here. Their older son, Charlie, was Manio. And so he and Cliff Britton, the director, got in an argument. And Charlie was a big-time actor. I mean, he went out to Hollywood and all. And so he didn't go on for 2 weeks. And I didn't, I walked in that night and I had one rehearsal. And they walked in and he said, go to the costume shop. And I go in there and they, wear little loincloths were about this big. And Manny had a nice one.
Manny was a stud.
They said, you're going on for Manny. And I said, what? And they said, you're going on for Manny. And I said, well, I hardly know the words. Well, Cora Mae Bass Knight was a Gona, and she said, George, I'll help you. I said, I'll tell you what to do. Louis Midget, that his dad was in charge of the Elizabethan Garden. Louis was Manio's son. Now, he's a pretty big guy for me to jump and throw him up on my shoulder today. But I went on for him for 2 weeks. During that period of time, they took pictures for the Lost Colony. 4 or 5 years later, I walked in the Croatan, and they thought it was Charlie. Pictures of my pictures all over the place. A lot of it's my back. But I said, they thought Charlie took the pictures, and he didn't. But it was an experience that I'd say that it was unbelievable for a young kid to get in that situation. Now, we didn't make a load of money, $28 a week. That was doing stagehand work as well as the Indian.
Hard work.
I think the Indian was 21 a week. And I think they'll make a little bit more than that now. I don't know.
The benefits aren't much better either.
We used to have to come early from Currituck. And the ladies in the dress shop, the costume shop, Rennie, and they were all local ladies back there. And I'd go in and kid around like I like to talk to women. I think that's a nice thing to have as a pastime. But anyway, I'm talking, one night there's this beautiful girl in there, they're fixing in a costume. I said, man, a new girl in the show, I'll ask her out, this will be great. So we sat there and talked, giggled, laughed. By that time the door opened and they said, can we get Miss America out here to get her picture taken? She said, I'll be right out there in just a second. And I'm going, what in the world?
I better hurry back to her.
And the women, they go, she likes you, why don't you talk to her? I said, okay. So we came back in, they encouraged me, and I said, I couldn't say a lot. It was like, so forget about it. I walked out the door. I said, this won't be good anyway.
Well, you get an A for trying.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the casino. I think that's something most everybody in here can share. We tend to look back on things that happened in the past and put probably make them better than they really were. But I think the casino was one of those timeless things that really was everything that everybody says it was. And you could go in there, you were barefooted, they really encouraged you to take your shoes off. And I mean, there was some fantastic dancing. We don't have a lot of this hip-hop pants and stuff, but they were, whether it was a jitterbug or whether, all people, the visitors, it was a place to go. It was mostly a local crowd, but, everybody was there. Jimmie, I'm going to come to you on this one here. What's some of the casino was right there in your neighborhood.
Right here, almost next door.
Yeah.
Everybody liked the casino.
Yeah.
Nobody disliked the casino. Everybody liked Rise Rusk that owned the casino.
Right.
The lady from the reverse, lady from married over it, and everybody loved her.
What's some of your remembrances? Did you have, or was it the old shaggin' bands, or what were some of the...
Had local bands and then had some of the name bands of the country. The Platters, Fats Domino, I don't know how many more there, name bands.
Artie Shaw?
Yeah,
Louis Armstrong.
Louis Armstrong?
Louis Armstrong.
Yeah.
There was a tremendous amount of the big time bands there.
Well, that really says a lot that here we are in this out here, and that you would pull in that kind of entertainment. They could have gone to Virginia Beach. They were in Virginia Beach. it was much more convenient to be down there in Myrtle Beach, but something attracted them to this area, and it probably was the reputation that the casino had. I mean, every night that place was open, it was pretty well hopping. You know, unless it was some kind of raging storm or raging rain, but it was the place to go. Adam, what you have any remembrances of the casino? I know it was a haul for y'all, but
Oh, I just love to go, and the dancing, and I was trying to think of the young lady that was so famous for dancing down here, and her first name, Teresa. Teresa Beasley. Yeah, I can see her today.
Harvard Collington.
She was Nags Head.
Nags Head.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dottie Fry and Mattie, Mark's sister was another. There was a lot of those.
But like you say, Rice Westcott was a wonderful man. He took care of all of us locals, I guarantee you that. He was very kind to everyone.
George, what about you?
Well,
Here we go.
when I was working at the Seafair, on Sunday, every once in a while we get low on cash. And so Mr. Heyman, Mike's dad, he said, "Curry Tucker, come here, boy." Said, "Give me a $200 bill." Said, "Go down there and give me $200 worth of ones from Rass." So I went into his office upstairs, and Roy Etheridge had just passed away, and Bobby Roughton that's no longer with us. They were the bouncers, had their sleeves rolled up, one on one side of this huge desk and one on the other. There was money banded and rolled up. Now, my friends Willie Etheridge and Alan Doe, they love for me to tell their story because I try to talk like Raps when I do it. And he goes, "Hello there, Captain. How you doing today? What can I do for you?" He's kind of a thick cane kind of guy. And I said, "Mr. Raps, Mr. Heyman sent me down here to get some $1 bills." "How many you want? $5,000 or $10,000 worth of?" I said, "No," I said, "I just want $200 worth." Well, I kid you not, he unbanded one of them and goes, "1, 2, 3. And then he got 98, 99, They kept my finger all there, but you can count it. He did that with $200 bill. When I got back to the city, Mr. Heyman said, "Where have you been?" I said, "Mr. Heyman, Mr. Rass had to count out every one of them." He said, "That tight old sucker made me $10,000 last night," which was a heck of a night.
You know, the Ash Wednesday storm, if somebody can tell me, it took out one of the hotels. Was it the Arlington or the Nags Head? One of our hotels, our famous hotels, met its demise there with the Ash Wednesday storm. Does anybody know? The Arlington? Okay.
Well, it didn't go all the way out because it was damaged, but 77, I think, from the Arlington.
Arlington was like 73.
Okay, all right. Okay.
No, it was later than that because it was 77. I stayed there most of the time.
Okay, all right. All right. Well, George, tell us a little bit about your family over on the.
Well, my mom was an Owens,
Okay.
and her father was a Smith, and this is where these Smiths come from back in the back. They came from East Lake. And I think it is the Methodist church over there where our great-granddad is buried. They got on his tomb, only thing got is Sam written in by finger. And he was in Pickett's charge at Gettysburg. I don't know how in the world they found him at East Lake, but he got up there and got shot in the heel. And I think in the early 1900s, he tried to get a pension from the government, and they decided anybody that fought against the United States, they didn't want to give them a pension. But my grandma was an Owens from Harbinger, and this is Jonathan L. and his brother owned practically all of Harbinger. Like if you notice, Griggs is owned Point Harbor, the Gallops kind of owned Halls Harbor, the Sawyers owned up here, the Owens, the Newberts, it kept right on going up the road, and they were the big property owners over there. And my mom taught school in Kitty Hawk 32 years.
Wow.
So she taught. Everybody down here that's probably, 45 to 78 or something, she taught.
She taught your sister?
She taught, yeah.
Yes.
No?
Yes.
Okay. All
I
right.
remember Mrs. McLean being at the school when I was I was in high school, but I remember her being.
And all of us, I had two brothers, and one of them was a lawyer in Florida, and my younger brother was a doctor. He used to be in Elizabeth City, but moved to Charlotte. And so we all went to Carolina. We were all, had to go to Carolina. I mean, that was it. I had to go to college too. And Miss Scarborough, when I grew up, Mom said, you don't want to be like those people over there in going into service and then retiring. I said, then nobody lives over there but fishermen and Coast Guard people. I got 38 years old. I said, Mom, how come all these fishermen and Coast Guard people are back down here not working and I'm still working? I said, I don't understand this college thing.
Well, Ada, tell us a little bit about when you were going to school. Sometimes there where you were, you might have to drive yourself.
You spent, when we were at Capital Summit, you spent a lot of time on the school bus, getting to Kitty Hawk, all the way to Kitty Hawk, because all the roads were sand.
And if you got stuck, there was no such thing as being tardy. They just dealt with it.
Well, yeah, but I mean, getting stuck down here on the Outer Banks was just a big part of life. You knew how to get stuck and you knew how to get out of it most of the time. And then when my dad, his first job, once he retired from the Coast Guard, we lived over at Martin's Point. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that was there then was P.K. Gravely was the owner, China American Tobacco Company, and he had a small hunting club there. And we had a house for the caretaker. And for me to get to school, I had to row across the creek to catch a school bus in Southern Shores Woods. And at that time, there was not a house in the wood in Southern Shores.
Right, just a
little village at Duck and a few people that came from Capital, nothing in Southern Shores. And when I was 13, I used to drive Dad's 1937 Chevrolet to school. Every now and then, I knew how to take a tailspin or two in Kitty Hawk Woods. Driving to school. And one time, my dad forgot. We had really gotten quite a storm in here, and I was afraid to get off and try to row across the creek, so I decided, I would walk home. And that's quite a ways from the highway all the way into the end of Martin's Point. But, and then all the cold weather coming in, the winds up where the creek. When I got home, I was so nearly frozen that my dad took his big old hands and just walked up and down my legs, and he was so apologetic. He said, I completely forgot about you. I just forgot about you. He was about to beat me to death. He wouldn't let me go in the house till he could get me warmed up. So.
One of the, back in the day there, I mean, before we ever really had, we got hard surface roads here in the 30s and stuff, but you had to know how to drive that sand, and you didn't have to have a driver's license. One of my favorite stories is Stocky and Anderson Midget down in Hatteras running the old Hatteras to Manio bus line. Right. And we have a picture down in Hatteras, actually it's in Stocky's collection of photographs there, but it's him sitting on a stack of phone books, 13 years old, knuckles on that big old steering wheel. And the story goes, I would like to talk to Stocky about this one time, but I was told that a congressman came over on Toby Tillett's ferry and got down there and asked Stocky for a ride down there. And Stocky said, this is my bus, it'll be such and such, go ahead and get on here. He says, son, you're not old enough to drive this thing. Stocky, not knowing that he was a congressman, said, get in, sit down, shut up, hold on. And this government person told this story for, all through his political life there in Raleigh. But we've got a couple of people out here I wanted to recognize. Lois Smith is here tonight. Lois, could you come up for a second and talk? We've got a mic here, or how about I carry it over there to you?
Yeah, that would be a lot.
All right. All right. Is this doable, Chris, or?
Sure.
Yeah, that's fine. All right. All right. I was down in Ocracoke all day. My lips got sunburned. You think Ras Westcott had trouble talking? I'm having a hard time making my lips move.
I made that trip down to Buxton. Pat Miller.
about Brian,
You probably-
story
Frank
before,
Miller.
Frank Curtis,
Yeah, he was a officer in charge at Catholic Inlet, and he had a couple
I'll
dollars.
tell you, the last time I spoke to any kind of a
On the trip that we're
group,
talking about.
not this size, but almost, was 1991, the year I retired from teaching.
Yeah.
And it was a group of 6th and 7th graders, wild as
Yeah.
bucks. So you folks are very well behaved tonight, so.
Well, tell us a little bit about your,
Oh, really?
some of your family connections. I
Well-
don't think people realize how big your people were in the industry here at the Outer Banks.
Well, I actually was born in Raleigh, came here as, I guess, 6 months old, 1937. My mother was a native of the area. Father was from the Raleigh area. And he lived all of his life here. He was a banker, Bank of Manteo. I don't know whether you're too young to remember that. But anyway, he said the bathtub had too much water in it for him. And living on the Atlantic Ocean wasn't his cup of tea. But he did live here all of his life. And I decided that in the 11th grade I wanted to go away and see how the other part of the world lived. So I left Manteo when I finished my junior year in high school and went to Campbell College. Well, it was Campbell College, but it was 2 years of high school as well as 2 years of college. So I finished and went to Meredith, finished Campbell in a summer session, went to Meredith at 15, and finished I finished school. I didn't finish at Meredith. Every college year was on a different campus. Now you decide what you want to about that. Anyway, I did finish at Wake Forest University, and I came back to Currituck my first year of teaching. So I ended up with Miss Curritucker. I do have a tie, but I want to tell you that folks in Manteo lived a very serene life compared to those in Currituck. And I was very young, of course, when I started teaching, and the kids thought I was a kid along with them. And I sort of thought I was too. So we lived in a teacherage there. The principal and his family lived downstairs, and 4 or 5 of us teachers lived upstairs in the teacherage. And I had a car, and I did all the things kids wanted me to do. So my principal called me down once and said, you know, you're an adult, supposedly, and you're going to end up losing your job if you don't start acting like an adult. I said, well, these kids wanted to play around, go to ride, and so on, so I thought it was all right. But anyway.
Before you drop them off.
Well, I don't know, Jackie and Sammy, I think. Well, there was a place called the Dewdrop Inn. I wasn't aware of it, but they all wanted to go to the Dewdrop, so I would drop them off. And then they wanted to go through the cornfields, and I would drive my 57 or 55 Chevrolet through the cornfields. Well, anyway, I did get through that, and Brian and this was a marriage made in heaven. Have you ever heard of that? A marriage made in heaven? Anyway, 52 years later, I don't know whether he still thinks it's heaven or whatever. But Brian went in the military, and I decided I'd follow him. So I went to North Africa, and we got married in North Africa. I taught school for the Navy. But going back to leaving Manteo at age 15, well, I was talking the other day, group of women in Raleigh, we were talking about early times and what we did, and I said, well, you know, I don't know why, but my parents did never stand in my way. I mean, at 15, I knew what I was going to do, and I left home, and they didn't say a word.
Jimmie, how old were you when you left Hatters?
15.
15? Mm-hmm.
Well, and the ladies who had known me a long time said, well, they probably were scared to death of you. They didn't want to get in your way.
Ada, how old were you when you left Duck?
When I left Duck, we left Duck and moved to Kildover Hills and then to Martins Point.
Okay.
But I got married when I was 16.
Right.
And I was married 51 and a half years when my husband passed away.
Tell us about, I want to know about your connection, Lois, to the past. You've got quite a connection here to Kitty Hawk with your grandfather. Who was your grandfather?
John T. Daniels, who did take the photograph of the first flight, but he certainly didn't know what he was doing. And he was not a photographer. He was just, I suppose, followed instructions, as history says. What was it?
From Wilbur.
He squeezed a bulb, as he was told to do, and it happened to turn out. So that was kind of a streak of luck. Then I was told later that they didn't know for several years whether the picture really did turn out or not.
Well, several weeks or several months.
Was it?
But yeah,
Not years?
but
Okay.
yeah, but you know, can you imagine? This was the mankind's greatest achievement, and you had to wait. If you think it's tough not getting an ultrasound to find out whether you're having a boy or a girl, well, Lois, thank you.
Yes.
All right. All right, come on. We've got about 10 minutes worth of tape left.
You know you're getting old when these folks were in your class when I taught at Buxton, John, and I didn't teach Stewart, did I?
You probably did, and I'm not related. I apologize. That's those other couches. Okay. Thank you, Lois. Okay, the talk there about the dewdrop in made me think of something. Sorry, Chris. Sorry about that. Ada, can you tell us about the hoot and holler? What's the name of the?
Was the Toot and Tell It is when I was back when we were young, teenagers, and casino and everything was going. The Toot and Tell It was in Manio, and right there at the corner now where all the intersection is, where the new bridge come in and this, that, and the other, and it was just kind of a beer joint with a few pool tables in it. And then across the bridge was the Sam and Omen's, and that was the Hoot and Holler. So if you went to Manio, they did have, at one time, they had it was right after World War I, there was a oblong building that was kind of like a double long garage, and I don't know what they did in there during the World War II, but right after it was all over, they turned that into like a dance hall, and that's the only reason we'd go to Manio, was they had a little dance hall there. And that's how I learned about the Toot and Tell It and the Hoot and Holler. And,
okay, guys, you know, we're going to be running out of tape here real soon. We've only got a limited amount of time on this, but I wanted to know if there were any questions that you might have for Ada, George, or Jimmie. But I would just ask that you please be mindful of James Austin stories, because yeah, we got to keep it clean. This is a PG storytelling event. We've already put the limits on PG. We don't want to go R. Any questions for our guests? Linda, somebody.
I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
I have one for Adam.
Okay.
When your father taught all those ducks, how did you preserve them?
There's a question: when your father caught all those ducks, how did you preserve them if there was no refrigerators up there?
we had an outside barn that he had a big cooler that was as big as one of these tables with a real heavy lid, and we used to buy ice by chunks and kept it wrapped in tow sacks at Ned Rogers' store from Duck. He had a fish house there. And we kept ice out in that barn during the winter months. And then we had a small ice box inside the house. We didn't always have ice, particularly in the summertime. But the ducks in the wintertime were hung on the north end of the house. And a lot of them were just kept that way. And then, of course, I don't think Dad ever sold any ducks or anything. A lot of them, they used to corn them and sell them and put them in barrels, and they would ship them out. in the boats, and they ship them up north.
It was some good eating. I mean, we take
Yeah.
turkeys for granted today for Thanksgiving, but you know, back in the day, if you had an organic corn-fed goose, you had some really good eating.
Yeah.
Another question? Yes.
I just wonder, kind of a vivid, this is for Ada also, a vivid description of what Duck looked like when you lived there in terms of how many houses, how many people, was it all sand? You know, what did it look like?
Well,
Okay, Adam, let me, we have a question about what Duck might have looked like, a vivid description, if you will, of what Duck was like, you know, 50 years ago. Let me see if I can find this picture here. But if you can address that, Adam.
yes, well, where I was at Caffer's Inlet, it was, of course, all sand. That's the Sanderland area today. And that was just all beach sand, and there was no trees because we had cattle all over the beach. And up until 1939. In the village of Duck, the houses were very small. Ned Rogers' home was the biggest home, and he's the guy that had the store. And that one store is still standing in Duck. The other homes were all very small. And a lot of them did not even have screens to the windows or the doors. They were fishermen. They made their living fishing. Also, during the hunting season, they took out parties, duck hunters, and then they also killed ducks and sold ducks.
Well, Ada, the main drag coming through Duck now, Highway 12, the paved surface,
Right.
that actually exists in, or was there a shore side?
Oh, no. We had a road along the sound front that went in to Duck from Southern Shores, and you continued right along just west of the sand dunes along the shore road there. And there was no road in through Southern Shores. None of that came in until the early 50s.
What was it like up there coming through Southern Shores? And when we got the dunes, it started holding back the ocean. But that ride down Highway 12 from Southern Shores intersection up to Duck, was it flat beach with scrub cattle running and hogs running all over everywhere?
No, the cattle were stopped in 39, and the road through Southern Shores didn't go in until the early 50s, latter 40s, early 50s. So that was when that all went in.
Okay. Thank you. Another question.
I just wanted to know about the tattoo of his grandfather on his arm and the story behind that.
Who? Jimmie?
What tattoo, big?
All right, take it.
He was George McLean's girlfriend's grandfather. Bitch, she's gonna kill me, George, for this. You know that, don't you? Yeah. His name was Tommy. And he come ashore in a whiskey barrel at Hatcher's Inlet. The boat sunk, and he was too drunk to get in a lifeboat. They left him, and he come in a liquor barrel in Hatcher's Inlet. That's where that Austin group got started down there. Now, she will kill me after this, George. You know that.
You know that's an X, too.
Yeah, it's like the old story goes, down there, the booze yacht. Some folks lost all their religion and they backslid by the score when the booze yacht come ashore. Okay, that was good. All right, anybody, it's kind of hard to see. Just blurt something out.
Right here.
Okay.
Daddy, I have a question for Miss Ada. I know when I was a child and coming down here in the late 40s, early 50s, we used to do a lot of bass fishing in Cathy's Inlet.
Right.
Was that not a major bombing range at one time?
At one time, north of the village, there was a bombing range in there, yes.
How did that affect y'all back then?
They had towers at the north end and the south end, and you had to have permission to go through there. They would, you know, you'd go there and they'd see your car was there, and then they would notify the pilots that they had a car going through.
That's what I thought I remembered, because we had to be careful the hours we did go in Currituck Sound
Right,
to go fishing.
right.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
We got 2 minutes to take left. One more question. Anybody?
Did you go to high school in Elizabeth City?
Did you go to high school in Elizabeth City?
Me? No, Kitty Hawk.
There was a high school.
Yes,
Judy ran the park.
yes.
No, Judy ran the hospice place, man.
Jimmie, talk about Daddy and Tommy Daniels in the hurricane when y'all went to the store.
That was next to the supermarket. Her father was John Bell. What is today is Lucky 12, the beer joint. God, whatever you call it, bar. Was John Bell's grocery store in those years of the Ashminster storms you're talking about.
Right. Any stories come to mind?
Nothing except the water to see your waist and the soap powder to see your eyes in there. It all come on top of the water. John, her father, had 2 half gallons of the best wine you ever drank. He got them under the counter out of the water. I remember that.
Well, Jimmie, maybe promise I wouldn't spring anything on him, but I'm not. But stopping into his seafood store, I'd urge you to stop in there and just chat with him if he's out front. But you told me one time in one of your many trips up to the Fulton Fish Market, carrying fish up there, you had a fella from Hatters with you, Eve O'Neill, and you had gone out to a club, the Aristocrats, or it was some high rent club. Can you tell us a little bit, you know the story I'm talking about?
We were at Santa was 21, yeah, in New York. Eve was kind of insulted because he wasn't recognized in there. He kept wondering why they got a big round of applause when everybody come in. 40, 50 people eating candlelight. Eve said they didn't give us around. I said, Eve, there's celebrities in here. We don't get around. He said, we will too. He went up and gave the doorman $40 to an hour.
Did you get around?
Yes.
All right, my friends, let's call it a night. We're getting the action.